Hi, welcome to Chard Review. The movie is based on a true story, and it revolves around a brave freedom individual named Eric Liddell. At the start, the narration explains how Eric had won a gold medal in the 400-meter race in the 1924 Olympics. However, despite getting tons of offers from various American brands to continue his sports career, Eric had declined all of them. It turns out that he was born in China, and so, right after the Olympics, Eric returned back to his birthplace to serve as a missionary, a person who promotes Christianity in a foreign country. There he married the love of his life, Nurse Florence Mackenzie. Eric then spent most of his years in China teaching chemistry, English, and even athletics in the Anglo-Chinese college. Despite being Scottish by descent, he cared a lot for the Chinese people as he regularly provided the poor communities with needs and services. However, during that time, the ongoing war with the Japanese slowly spread across the country, which brought a lot of misery to the Chinese. One day Eric goes to school where he teaches and notices one of his students is late. He spots the absentee from outside the window, running towards the school with a basket full of pears. All of a sudden, several warplanes emerge out of the sky and drop a bomb near the school, brutally killing the child outside, devastating Eric. Life in China has now become so dangerous because of the Japanese aggression that the British government advises its nationals to leave the country. A pregnant Florence and their two daughters immediately decide to leave for Canada, but Eric stays back in China. He instead accepts a position in a rural mission station in Shaoxing, which serves the poor. Before leaving, Florence asks Eric's assistant and good friend Xu to take good care of her husband. He reassures her that he will keep them safe at all costs, and with this, Florence and the children board their ship and depart. A while later, Eric and Xu drive back home, only to find that the Japanese Imperial Army has eluded and taken over his residence. However, Eric is not saddened by the sight. He instead begins to pray for strength and guidance. With his home now uninhabitable, Eric is left with no choice but to seek refuge elsewhere. He turns to the school where he teaches, which has been converted into a shelter for refugees fleeing the war-torn areas. Here, Eric finds himself bonding with the displaced families, sharing in their struggles and offering whatever support he can. Every morning, Eric leads the refugees on a run, hoping to uplift their spirits and provide a sense of normalcy in their lives. Despite the hardship and uncertainty that surrounds them, Eric's unwavering faith and kind heart bring hope and solace to those around him during one of his morning 231 months. Eric comes across a small child named Xiao, wandering alone on the streets. Moved by the child's plight, Eric brings him back to the school and provides him with a safe place to live. As time passes, he grows close to Xiao and becomes like a father figure to him. He teaches him to read and write and provides him with a sense of stability and belonging in a world that has been turned upside down by war. One day, while Eric is checking the mail, he discovers a letter from Florence, his beloved wife who has been in Canada with their daughters. Through it, he learns that they have welcomed new addition to their family, a baby girl. The news fills Eric with a sense of joy and gratitude, knowing that despite the distance between them, his family is safe and thriving. I guess his wife is even asexually reproducing, right? Right. That same evening, Eric gathers with the refugees in the school to celebrate the news of his daughter's birth. The atmosphere is one of joy and hope as they all come together to share in his happiness. As the evening wears on, Eric and Xu begin to talk about their families and loved ones. Eric reveals that his brother is stationed at a hospital in the nearby city of Shaoxing and that the hospital is in dire need of medical supplies. The missionaries there have exhausted their resources and the situation is growing more desperate by the day. Determined to help his brother and the patients in need, Eric offers to donate his last possession, a treasured watch that has been in his family for generations. So after several days of planning and preparation, Eric, Xu, and a few other volunteers discreetly purchase the much-needed medical supplies from a nearby hospital because the Japanese have prohibited such transactions carry out their operation. At night, to avoid detection, the next day, the team sets out in a truck loaded with the supplies, determined to reach the hospital in Shaoxing. Along the way, they encounter a border control checkpoint where Japanese soldiers are strictly enforcing restrictions on travel. As they approach the checkpoint, Eric and his team are stopped by the guards and asked to explain their presence. Eric shows them an old newspaper featuring his photograph on the front page, highlighting the victory in the 400-meter race at the Olympics. The guards are intrigued and ask Eric what he's doing in China, and when they learn that he is a school teacher, they let him pass sometime later. They eventually reach the hospital and hand out all the supplies to the needy. In the next scene, we are shown that the Japanese have initiated war with the US after their attack on Pearl Harbor. Consequently, while Eric is officiating a marriage, the Japanese Imperial Army stormed the church and sabotaged the wedding. Eric, along with all the wedding attendees and many other people, are taken to the Visayan internment prison camp where they are held against their will. The leader of the Japanese Imperials explains that they will be organized into groups. The people who have families will be kept together while all the others will be separated. One night the guards wake Eric up and take him to the commander of the Imperial Army. Turns out he wants to race Eric and beat him as he had heard of his Olympic achievements. So Eric is given special care and is provided with better food than the other prisoners. However, instead of keeping the food to himself, he shares it with his fellow prisoners, even though it's a risky move. Meanwhile, Shu and the child shall search for the missing Eric and finally find the camp where he is being kept. To help him, the two men wish to get cleaning jobs inside the prison camp. One day, while Eric is teaching the kids chemistry outside, he spots them doing labor, much to his surprise. She then hides a bag full of goods for Eric under a tower, which she picks up later that night by sneaking inside. He takes the bag inside and opens it in front of his fellow prisoners, and they are amazed to see fresh fruits and vegetables along with many other items which are restricted inside the camp. Just think about this scene next time you are turning down your broccoli at dinner. In the next scene, the day of Eric's race with the commander finally arrives and everyone cheers him on to win. However, it is evident that Eric is very weak and malnourished as he hasn't eaten any of the special foods which were given to him. The race commences and Eric initially takes the lead, but due to his weak body, he falls over while running and loses the race. All of a sudden, one of Eric's friends named David speaks up for him, yelling that he is starving and hasn't had anything to eat. The commander and the other guards are confused upon hearing this and question Eric whether or not he had eaten the food that they had given him after finding out the truth. The commander is furious, and so Eric, along with David, are beaten up and taken to a solitary confinement hole where they are kept in for days on end as punishments. One night she sneaks inside the camp and approaches Eric, offering him food and water, but seeing a weak and desperate David starting beside him in another hole, he offers his food to him as well. She then begs Eric to let him help him escape the camp as the Japanese might have planned on killing him. However, Eric refuses to leave his people behind and decides to stay, stating that they will depend upon him. A few days later, the two prisoners are eventually released from the confinement cell and taken back to their rooms, where they are cheered on by the others. However, Eric's relief is short-lived as he is assigned to perform intense manual labor within the prison compound. One day, he discreetly meets and talks to S.H.I.E.L.D. The latter reveals that because of Japan's poor results from the ongoing war, the food supply to the prison camp has been cut off. He then tells Eric that he's made a deal with some of his connections inside the prison. The deal makes the guards turn off the electric fence twice every month, which will allow the little kids show to be able to sneak inside the prison camp to provide food supplies to some of the dubious guards as well as Eric and the prisoners. That very night, Xiao is able to sneak into the camp undetected, delivering bags filled with much-needed food items to the starving prisoners. However, the next day trouble brews as some guards catch David smoking outside his room and punish him. Desperate and fearing for his life, he turns to Shu for help, pleading with him to assist in his escape from the camp despite the high stakes. Shaw and Shaw hatch a daring plan to sneak David out in a container meant for human waste. Luckily, the plan turns out to be a success, and David escapes without any trouble while the troops inside the camp are furious about his disappearance. He escaped, that's shit. No, he escaped in shit. The commander's frustration reaches a boiling point as he questions every single inmate about David's escape, but none of them provide any useful information. Desperate, he takes one of the prisoners named Hugh and throws him into solitary confinement, hoping that the threat of punishment to force someone to speak up. As tensions in the camp continue to rise, Eric's health takes a turn for the worse. He begins to experience frequent nosebleeds, a sign that his physical condition is deteriorating rapidly. After a long and grueling confinement, Hugh is finally released, but his condition is dire. He urgently needs medical attention for pneumonia, and the other prisoners are at a loss for how to help him. However, Eric refuses to give up hope when he discovers that one of the other inmates is a doctor. He works tirelessly with him to provide the best possible care for Hugh, hoping to save his friend's life, but they soon realized that the medical supplies they need are not available within the camp. Desperate for a solution, Eric hatches a daring plan. He approaches the commandment major of the Imperial Army and challenges him to a race with the condition that if he wins, he can call any person from outside the camp to bring in the necessary medical supplies. The major initially rejects the proposal, but later accepts, thinking that he will easily win the race because of Eric's weak and frail body, and gives him until the end of the week. The train. So without delay, Eric trains his frail body to its limit, determined to win the race despite the warnings from the other prisoners who assume that it will be a death sentence for him. The day of the race arrives, but the other prisoners are forbidden from leaving their rooms and watching it unfold. Hence they pray for Eric's success and start singing, hoping that their voices will carry over to him. Soon the race begins and everyone holds their breath and suspense. Eric starts off slowly, but gradually picks up speed and begins to pull ahead of the commandment major, to everyone's shock. He crosses the finish line first. Despite his exhausted body as a result of his historic win, Shaw is granted access inside the camp. That night, he brings loads of medicine, making all the prisoners ecstatic. However, their happiness is short-lived as one of the commanders enters the power supply room and orders the guard to go outside, immediately realizing that the commander will turn the fence on while Zhao is climbing. The guard heads to the prisoner's room and warns Eric about it. Hearing this, all the prisoners frantically rushed to the electric fence and shouted. Unfortunately, all their efforts are in vain as the evil commander manages to turn the fence back on, electrocuting Shell and killing him right in front of everyone. Both Eric and Shu are heartbroken to see Shao hanging from the fence while the commander arrives on the scene and warns everyone that the Japanese Imperial Army is not to be messed with. A few silent days passed by in the prison camp, and due to the lack of treatment, a sick Hugh dies in his bed. 1106. Eric musters the strength to inform his pregnant wife Catherine, who falls to her knees upon hearing the tragic news. The weight of the loss hangs heavily over the camp. The next day, it's revealed that Eric had been granted access to go home by Christmas. However, he talks to the commandment major and convinces him to let Catherine go in his place, wanting to preserve her and her unborn child's life. One day Eric dies of a brain tumor inside the prison camp. He, however, gets a proper burial due to the courage and valor he has shown all his life. All his friends pay respect to his grave while she also visits the camp and gets emotional, bursting into tears. The movie ends 5 months after Eric's death, where the prisoners get the relieving news that Japan has surrendered in the war, granting them freedom from the prison camp. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below, and if you like the video, please like and subscribe for more movie review. Thank you for watching.